Alcohol. So here we go. We are live today. I'll wait for some time so the people join, and
Yep.
we'll.
Because when you go live, like it pops up on their feed and then they jump in, right? So give it a few
Exactly.
minutes.
Exactly.
Cool, that's cool. Okay, because you're live in your Facebook group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. How many people are in the Facebook group now? Like over 3,000, 4,000?
More than 3,000, 3,700 now.
Nice, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a good sized group.
It's getting increased time by time. It just need a little more my appearance. Sometimes I'm busy in work, so
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your goals are with the group.
yeah,
I always
exactly.
think like what are my business goals with this Facebook group? Because, I think I don't want to like go in there and post just for the sake of posting. I want to go in there and post to get to work with people. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like my goal with my Facebook group is to get business.
Exactly.
That's its
Exactly. Yes,
goal. It's
right.
not for me to like, you know, comment too much or, I don't mind like helping people out and stuff, but I have to find that balance of helping people out and
Exactly.
making sure that I hit my financial and business goals.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I'm looking for. This one.
Because you can spend a lot of time on Facebook, man, and then next thing you know, hours have gone by and you're like, what am I doing?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, dude.
Exactly.
Happens to everybody, man.
So you went to gym today or not yet?
Not yet. I'm going to go. I've got a lot of phone calls today. So I've got a phone call after this, another phone call, and then I'm going to go. Well, I got 3 more actually. So 3 more phone calls and then gym. I'm going to go to the gym and then I've got the chiropractor.
Oh, perfect. And how's your back now?
It's good, man. Back's perfect. Like I think ever since I started chiropractor, I've learned more about like my neck and my back and how to really make sure that it's healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Let
it's
me
important.
also.
Well,
Yeah. Can okay. I'm I'm posting in your group as well. That PPC AMS accelerator community. What do you think?
yeah, you can if you want, for sure.
That's that. That's that. So, Sin, what do you think that for 2022? Any new changes? Any observations or something like that?
For PPC?
Or PPC?
Yeah. 2022. I think that for 2022, it's going to be, I think sponsored display is going to be a bit more complex.
Uh-huh.
Like it's a complex beast compared to sponsored products,
Hmm.
and even sponsored brands because of the amount of targeting that you can do.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get more complex. So it's kind of like, how does it fit into your Amazon advertising strategy, and where does it land? Because when I think of advertising, the goal of, well, for me personally, like the goal of advertising for my clients is to grow their business. So, not only produce more advertising sales, but to help grow the overall organic. And so with sponsored display and sponsored brands, I'm, always thinking about how does that kind of fit into, how do we test those, but not spend too much money and energy on those. So, so far up to this point, when it comes to ranking keywords, sponsored products seems to be like the primary driver. But I think that, for bigger brands, a lot of bigger brands, at least, the people I'm talking to who work with bigger brands, they've got budgets for sponsored display, sponsored brands. 2022, last year we saw aggregators. We saw the Amazon aggregators, so companies that are buying a lot of Amazon businesses and kind of,
Yeah.
we see that a lot. So that's probably going to have an impact on the market somehow. Their challenge is operations and PPC, managing PPC for so many different accounts and different niches. So, they could potentially influence some things in 2022. And then we saw in 2021, so aggregators, sponsored display, sponsored brands, sponsored products. What was the other thing we saw? I can't remember, but I think 2022 is going to be more of that. It seems like aggregators are still raising money from what
Yeah.
I'm seeing. Like they're raising a lot of money to buy Amazon businesses. That's a
Yes.
big trend. And so we might see more people selling Amazon businesses as well. And so, for service providers like PPC service providers, that might make less clients available. But there are also a lot of people who are teaching people how to sell on Amazon. And so there's kind of like this balance where like there are some people who have been selling on Amazon for a few years that sell to an aggregator, but then there are courses on how to sell on Amazon that people are learning how. So that's kind of feeding into like the independent entrepreneurs that service providers would work with. So and I think for 2022, it's only going to get more competitive. We've seen year over year, it's going to get more competitive. But I think the biggest thing is that like the giveaways and a lot of those like super URLs and stuff like that. I don't really know a lot of details about those, to be honest, but I do know that those are becoming less and less viable. Like Amazon is creating policies to kind of hedge against that, like doing giveaways and
Yeah.
inflating rank. So Amazon PPC is going to get more important than ever because you can't rely on that as much as before. And I think Amazon is going to continue to kind of learn more about how to crack down on it, and that's going to make Amazon advertising more important. And so people might spend more time doing it, and that could make it even more competitive. So I think those are a few items that will kind of unfold and influence the market, the PPC, the advertising itself.
Perfect. Of course. The giveaway stuff, the seller code of conduct, the Amazon, they have introduced the policy, and now giveaways. And still, I saw many Chinese sellers and other many sellers still they are doing this stuff. Still, they are doing, and they are going getting suspensions in their listings and their accounts as well.
Yep.
Mhm. So, what do you say about the? Let's talk about the sponsored products, keyword. So how do you scale these sponsor products, and how do you manage ACoS of these keywords, and how do
Yeah.
you structure?
I think like just from a pure bid optimization standpoint, you have to make sure that you're cutting keywords. You're making sure that you're on an ongoing basis, on a systematic basis, you're cutting keywords that are not getting sales, and you're decreasing. You're using formulas to decrease the ACoS of the keywords that have an ACoS above your target. And then when it comes to scaling, it's about testing. But a lot of people don't understand the ecosystem of Amazon advertising in the sense that like you have to find the right balance of testing new keywords and optimizing bids. If you don't find that cadence, the cadence of how to do it, then you're never it's gonna be hard to get your goals. So, for example, like, if you test keywords every week, or if you're launching new campaigns like every day, it's gonna be hard to lower your ACoS because when you're testing new keywords, they have to go through a testing cycle, which means that they might have a high ACoS, they might not even convert. And so when you test new keywords, the nature of a test is that you don't know what's going to happen, and so you have to allot for that, like an ACoS increase. So you have to figure out like how often should I launch campaigns, and then how often should I do bid optimizations to make sure that I'm able to hit my goals. Like don't launch campaigns every day all the time because it's going to make your ACoS go up potentially, depending on how you do it, obviously. But it makes it harder to control things because you keep testing new stuff and everything's new. So, testing campaigns on like a weekly, every other week basis is much easier to manage things. So I think getting that cadence down, being consistent, I think that like, I don't know, man, I'm just learning that like consistency is a really important skill that is really hard for a lot of people because it's there's a lot of emotion attached to your actions, and so like if things aren't going your way, you don't want to do them. And so like if your PPC is not doing well, you might want to avoid doing it. And so I'm just learning that consistency is like one of those things that really is an undervalued skill set. Like you have to be consistent. And when you're consistent, you can, one thing I learned is that when you're consistent with PPC, you're able to see the behaviors and the outputs and the cause and effect and how changes, decrease ACoS or how changes increase PPC sales. So like that consistency and that observation is really important skill set to have, because, it can be really hard to do that. And then, another thing with PPC is making sure you have a good product. That's, I don't know if I'm going to venture too much into that territory, but you can't launch in a really competitive market and expect your PPC to be good. You have to have a decent market with like not super competitive, and you have to have a good product. And so those are precursors to PPC, because if you don't have those, no PPC will help it. And that's dude, it's crazy. Like, and that's where you have to be very data driven, man, with PPC and with everything. Well, on Amazon, you have to be data driven. You have to like numbers and you have to like spreadsheets. And if you don't like those, well then, I don't know how it's going to do for you, because the people that I've worked with that do the best, they like numbers and they like spreadsheets. And it's the name of the game on just Amazon and PPC as well. But I think that's some good tips to scale, is like the bid optimization and the testing the new keywords. But you have to test new keywords using data as well. Like, you don't want to just test any keywords. And you have to understand that when you test keywords, your budgets go up, your spend goes up, your ACoS goes up. And then you have to use the bid optimizations to bring it down. So scaling is about testing more and then dialing it back with bid optimizations. Testing more. So it's not like this. It's like this, testing, ACoS goes up, sales go up. And then bid optimization, hopefully ACoS goes down, but sales remain the same, or maybe they'll go down a little bit. And then you test more. It's kind of like that's how it grows. It's not straight up.
It's not like that. Like you found 50 keywords and you launch it, and then you again found some keywords and then you again launch it.
Yeah, you just, it's not straight up like that. Nothing is. There's nothing like that. It goes up, then it goes down a little bit, maybe flat, then goes up. Ultimately you want the bigger increases to win, but you're going to have dips and flats,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, like, first of all, when you started this campaigns creation, how do you structure your campaigns, like in sponsor products or sponsor display or brands, or what's your best approach to structure the campaigns? And then after, like keyword targeting, how do you calculate your bids for the best for the established brands and new launching products?
So when it comes to the campaign structures, I highly recommend put the SKU or the ASIN in the campaign name and ad group name, because search term report, they don't have the SKU or the ASIN that you can correlate to a specific search term. So putting the SKU and the ASIN in the campaign and ad group name is going to allow you to filter search terms by SKU or ASIN. I think that's a good model to follow. It gets trickier when you're using sponsored brands, because you have, with the headline ads, you have 3 products. So it becomes a little trickier when you have that. Even with sponsored display, because of the amount of audience targeting and stuff, it becomes tricky. But you have to find a way to figure out how to like put the products in the campaign name and ad group name. One really easy way to do is put the ASIN or the SKU in there. When it comes to like that's how I structure campaigns. I put that in there. I put the match type. I always test each match type separately. It's just a personal preference. I think that when it comes to campaign and ad group structuring, I think that, my methods that I've used and teach people are good, but I also think that there are alternative methods that I even use, because, there are so many different scenarios when it comes to working with Amazon brands that you have to adapt your structure to those. But I think, for anybody who's kind of new to PPC, ASIN, SKU, and the campaign name is really good. And then when it comes to launching campaigns, if you have like 1 or 2 products, I think using campaign manager is okay. I think that using that's okay. But, if you got multiple products, you're going to want to use bulk files or software or a combination of both, because it just allows you to make like you can make multiple changes in a shorter time period. So I think that's really good. And then the last one, like how do you select search terms and stuff? We usually like, choose the 60-day search term report, 3 or more, and then 1 to 2. So find search terms that have 3 or more orders, and then we find search terms that have 1 to 2 orders, and we test those out separately. And calculating bids, I don't really know the numbers off the top of my head because I have specific formulas that I use in my program and that I use as well. But you don't I would say look at when it comes to testing new search terms, use the historical cost per click data because they give you cost per click data in the spreadsheet. Use that to make decisions on starting bids versus just what people tell you or suggested bids. So, but I don't remember the formulas off the top of my head.
Okay, perfect. So
Yeah.
we have one question. Here we'll take one question. Take this question, but uh, let's say for new products. Let's say for new products.
Yeah.
In the sense of PPC for new products.
Yeah.
What will be the best strategy for 2020 in 2022 for new
I
products?
mean, my recommendation is I don't know if it's the best or not. The best is relative and it's subjective, but my recommendation is the 4 campaigns. It's like 5 campaigns. I would say is really good. One, find like your top 10 to 20 main keywords that you want to rank for, and then you want to test those in sponsored products, keyword targeting, exact, phrase, and broad. And then you want to do product targeting as well. So you want to target your own product and you want to target your competitors. So you want to do product targeting, exact, phrase, and broad for your keywords. And then, I recommend doing an exact match top of search with those 10 to 20 keywords. And yeah, man, that's what I recommend there. It's pretty simple, but really like, what are you trying to do with PPC in the beginning? Rank for keywords. And honestly, the performance of your keywords will give you a lot of insight into whether or not your product will work. But it's simple, but I don't recommend using auto campaigns in the beginning because they just don't perform very well. ACoS is high. And Amazon has to like understand your listing, and I don't know, they just don't perform well. So I don't recommend auto campaigns. Just those 5 campaigns would probably be best bet. You want to keep it as lean as possible and as profitable as possible, and try to really get rank going, keyword rank.
And bid should be only down or down only, up and down, or fix. What do you say?
Down only. My recommendation is down only bid. In terms of starting bids, it depends on your niche. You could do like $2, $2 and something cents for exact, $1.75 or 80 for phrase, and then like what, $1.40 or something for broad. But it depends on your niche as well. You might have to do more if it's tougher niche. You might be able to do less. It depends.
Should we go in higher bid? Should we go for higher bids?
I think so. Yeah, we always do higher bids because you want to get as much sales volume and conversions as possible to start the rank. So yeah, I go higher bids in the beginning for launches for sure.
Exactly.
You want to be on the higher end.
Yeah, we have one more question. Let's take it. That how to lower down the ACoS being in beauty niche and competing with Dove and Nivea, like big brands in US. Oh, there are big brands.
Yeah, those are global brands. Those are brands that household names. You can't. You're not going to win. I mean, you can't win. You can't beat big brands because they have more money than you. They have way more money than you, and they don't care. They don't worry too much about profit as much as you do.
Exactly.
You want a 30% margin, maybe they want a 10% margin, or maybe they don't mind losing money. And think about this: they have so much search volume. So Dove and Nivea, right?
Yeah.
People search for that every day. They don't search for your brand, and so they got plenty of organic traffic. And so, they might be fine with losing money on ads. Maybe they get enough from organic traffic. So, and beauty is a really competitive niche. It's extremely competitive. It's really tough, man. I don't know how to lower ACoS. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've worked with brands that compete with other big brands. And guess what? We can't do much. It's hard,
Exactly.
man. It's really hard. Yeah, I still
You
haven't
can.
figured. Yeah, can't do it, dude, because
Yeah.
they, in those really competitive spaces, you know, they don't. It's just too hard, man. I don't have any advice on that one. And like with that's a tough situation because I don't really have good PPC advice, and I don't want to give business advice because they're not my business. But like, I personally, if I was starting an Amazon business, I probably wouldn't get into beauty personally, because it's so competitive.
Exactly. And they are bigger globally brand. They are selling globally, and they have more reviews, more budgets, everything. They have a lot. They no need.
Yeah. Plus,
Yeah.
you have to understand that like the way that you run your Amazon business is not the way that big brands run their Amazon business. You can't make the assumption that Dove and Nivea are running their Amazon business like you. For
Exactly.
most private label sellers, that's their only revenue stream. So they want to get like 30% margin, they want to get a good profit margin. It's the only product they sell. They don't sell anything else. To whereas Nivea and Dove, they sell in retail, they sell on Amazon, they sell on probably Walmart, they sell on their own websites. They're all over the place. They do wholesale as well. And so I'm sure. So for them, they think differently about their business. If they're selling on Amazon, number one, they have more brand search than you do. And so they're going to get people who just look for their brand and they're just going to buy it. But number two, they might think of Amazon as something as like, hey, we only need 10% margins or 5% margins because you want 20, 30% margins and you sell a smaller
Exactly.
volume, they sell
Exactly.
a ton. And so they only need 5, 10% margin. Plus, they might, there are plenty of scenarios where retail use different strategies to, they use different strategies to get people to, plus, if it's like subscribe and save, they might
Exactly.
even run at a loss. They might even
Exactly.
like lose money on each one because they know that people subscribe and save and then they don't have to pay for those customers in the future. So like they have a more complex approach to their business than a typical Amazon seller. So you can never compare yourself to a global brand because they're just more sophisticated. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just different.
Perfect. Perfect. So, Sin,
Yeah.
what do you say about between the sponsored products and sponsored display ad? There is three like bid for the bid optimization, optimize for viewable impressions, and optimize for page visits, optimize for conversions. I saw your post as well. That was the results were pretty good. What do you say? What do you recommend regarding these all types?
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, like the the tricky part is like when you like I've talked to a few people about this, the whole like optimize for viewable impressions where, you know, we didn't spend a lot of money, but we had tons of sales. And the problem is that those sales are not like they don't get attributed the same as sponsored products and sponsored brands. That's something you need to know. When you do optimize for viewable impressions, you're getting view through conversions. You get click through conversions and view through conversions. With sponsored brands and sponsored products, it's only click through conversions. And so, you have to take that in consideration. Like you're looking at, you might see like a super low ACoS and tons of sales from VCPM, optimized for viewable impressions, but you see tons of sales, but you don't see your overall sales growing. And that's why
Uh,
me, even as a PPC person, I even look at, when I work with people, I look at their overall revenue too, because I need to make sure that they're profitable. If they're spending more on PPC, but they're not seeing organic growth, well then, what's going
yeah,
on?
yeah.
So, with those three, I'll be honest, I've done limited testing. I have issues with the attribution. I don't have issues with the attribution model. I know what the attribution model is, but I'm not as interested in it as I was before I did testing personally at the moment. Who knows? Could change in a week, but sponsored display, I'll run limited testing, but it's not something that I anticipate will be a game changer until the data proves otherwise. My job is to follow data. My job isn't to follow opinion or to follow what everybody else is saying. It's to follow information. And luckily I work with clients and people, and they have good information. And so I follow that data. And then when, right now the data tells me that sponsored products is, the primary one. I don't mind doing limiting testing for the others, but I just have to be smart about where, my client's money goes. And I want them to hit their goals. So, I'm not as interested in sponsored display as I was before. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds.
For sure. And what about the sponsored brands, the brands?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth running those. One thing to note, what we've seen trend wise is that sponsored brands video is a lot more competitive than it used to be. The cost per click is a lot higher.
Yeah.
And one thing we also noticed was that it has a really high click-through rate, but it doesn't have like a great ACoS compared to sponsored products. Sponsored products will have a low click-through rate, but the ACoS is great.
Yeah.
The conversions are better. So, that's one pattern we've seen with sponsored brands video. Sponsor brands headline search, that's something you have to be careful with, because you need to be smart about making sure that the keywords that you test align with the headline that you test as well. So, making sure that the headline that you write is relevant to the keywords that you bid on. Because if not, your ACoS is going to be higher. Click-through rate will be lower.
So we need to focus more on sponsored products, on the keywords instead of sponsored display, right? Display.
Generally, yeah, I think so. I think that when it comes to new Amazon sellers or new launches, just do sponsored products for a few months. And then once you feel like you're established, then you can add on sponsored brands and sponsored display.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, later down the road.
Perfect. And how would you recommend the long tail keywords and short keywords, or 2-word keywords, or more long tail, like 8 words or 6 words? How do you find them, or how do you, because there's a technique
dude,
uh,
the thing is I've changed my position on strings. So like you said, 2 strings. So there's 1 string keywords, 2 string, 3 string, 4 string, 5 string, 6 string. So before, I always said to myself that the longer string a keyword is, the longer tail it is. Generally, that's true. Actually, in most circumstances, that's true. But there are some instances where there are keywords that are only like 3 strings, 2 or 3 strings, that don't get a lot of search volume. So, I always say, use a good tool that can give you some search volume numbers. I do recommend bidding on long tail keywords. I like to use merchant words to generate long tail keywords, because if you put in a seed keyword, it generates the outputs is a phrase match result. And so I like that a lot. So yeah, I think that, longer tail is better. You should be testing both. When I used to do SEO for a software company, and one thing that my manager and my manager taught me was, long tail keywords is the way to go, because those short tail keywords are more expensive. So you want to get as many long tail as possible.
These are, yeah. And in there is do you recommend that we should use budget cap or campaign level budgets?
Yeah. I think in the beginning, it's not so important. Like when you're launching if you're new to Amazon and you're a new seller, or, but that one becomes tricky, because I think that capping the daily budget is it's a more advanced thing, kind of. I think, in my opinion, it's more advanced strategy, because when I do tests where I cap budgets, I pull data. I look at different, pieces, I look at a lot of different data, because you have to find out whether or not it's actually getting you a return on investment. So, I think for newer sellers, budget, capping the budget, that's a more, I think, a more advanced optimization. It's a more, the way you would do it is you would basically find out what your current TACoS is, which is advertising spend divided by total sales. That's your current tacos. I'd pull data for the past 14 days, maybe 14-day spend divided by 14-day sales. And that's your tacos. And then that's your baseline, your benchmark. And, what you want to do is you want to bring that number down. So, you would find the 7-day average sales and multiply that by your target tacos, and you would cap that daily budget. That's how you would do it. And, we see good results. Like I ran tests. I'm running tests for a client. I've done three, 2 tests so far, and our tacos is down to like 5 point something percent, and our tacos is down to 5 point something percent, but our sales are going up. So the profit's going up, which is really nice for the client.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
it's good. Yeah, we're seeing that, spend is going down. PPC sales are going down a little bit, but the total sales are going up, and the PPC the total profit's going up, which is nice.
Mhm. And what
Yeah.
do you recommend for the placements? Like we should go for the top of search, or like we should go with high bids, or we should go a little bit and then we increase the percentage like that
Yep.
in the top of search.
Yep. And then Waseem, I got 5 more minutes if that's okay. I got a meeting coming up. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, yeah. At least
Cool.
it is.
Appreciate it. And then what was the question again? Sorry, Waseem.
Yeah, yeah. For should we go for the higher bids, or should we go keep lower bids and high percentage on the top of search pages? And
Yeah, for the top of search campaigns. Yeah, I would do personally. Like, I think the best, we've seen like mixed results. So you could find your exact match bid like $2, right? You're going to bid for exact match. And then you would divide that. And then you could do, I would do probably 200% on top of search and divide that number by 3. So, $2 divided by 3, that's going to be your starting bid. And then 200% on top of search. Because you always want to divide, by the top of search percentage that you're going to add.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So now we are in the shortage of time. Now we were going to discuss for the bulk files and your course and everything, but you got a call. No problem. Next podcast we will discuss your bulk file working and your course and when your formula gangster G formula.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, we did a lot of that back in the day, man.
It's amazing formula.
The G
Yeah,
formula. Those were
yeah.
those were like younger days. I made that formula,
Hmm.
but I've been doing it probably like 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and we were just having fun, man. I mean, we're just always trying to have fun with it because why not? It's we put in the time and the energy, might as well enjoy it. Yeah, we had to change it to the G formula because it's not very professional. The other
That's
word.
perfect. It's perfect. Even G for gangster. Even we can like it's really amazing formula. Even your course is really very pretty designed very well. Everything and every single word explained very very well. It even if I have the course, for example, I don't think of course we need someone, but to learn something, and implement, I don't think I need someone because
I
you
agree. Yeah.
the course is perfect, like slides and sheets and videos,
Yep.
everything practically and formulas, amazing.
Yeah,
So
we did. Yeah, that's one of the feedback that we get from people too. Is that like it's so so detailed that it makes it to where you don't need a lot of assistance outside the video and the formulas, and usually it's like so detailed and step by step that you can do everything and get those results very quickly.
exactly. So guys, Sin has a I don't know if people know or no, but he has a course like PPC MS Accelerator. If you
Yep.
people are interested, just message him and get the course.
All right, Waseem. Thank you, man, for having
Thank
me.
you. Yeah, in next podcast we will discuss this all bulk file operations and bulk file formulas and G formula as well.
All
We will
right,
discuss.
guys, for sure. And then, all right,
Thank
Waseem's Facebook group. I appreciate your guys' time and attention, and I will talk to you guys later.
Thanks. Take care.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Bye.
Bye.